All right. So if you all don't mind, I know that normally they don't do PowerPoints on this call, but we always do PowerPoints in the Great Houses call. And since I'm trying to cover, like 20 weeks of material in, 44 minutes, then I'll throw something up here on the board. So hopefully that's good by people. So we're going to attempt to cover 4 points tonight. First point is, what are games of honor, right? Games of honor, games of life is another word for that. What are the three roles in patronage? Because that was just seemed like a big breakthrough for people on the call. We're going to talk a little bit about status. If I get short on time, I'll probably skip, or cut into the status conversation a little bit. And then we'll talk about the four pillars of a great house and end with some action items, things that you guys can do to get you started on the great house path. Things you do right now, ideally, right? So we'll start off with the idea of games of life and death. Okay. So a death game is any game where you're wagering your life, your liberty, or your livelihood. I was raised Baptist, so life, liberty, and property doesn't quite alliterate. So I'm trying to get into that perfect Baptist alliteration. So life, liberty, livelihood, right? And that's what the founders were concerned about, right? These are the things for which men kill, barring strong like pacifistic convictions. And these games are always with us. Okay. Contrast that, a game of life is a game where you're not having to wager your life, your liberty, or your livelihood on the outcome. And this basically only occurs when you have a mutual culture, a set of mutual rules. You have some kind of tribe or group where you have common loyalty, and that's what allows you to compete for honor with men who are basically your brothers. And maybe I'm not entirely saying that women are excluded from this game, but historically speaking, this is kind of a male sport. All right. One of the key phrases here that pops up over and over again is the idea of all for one and one for all, right? And this is important because it means, like, what that phrase means is, if anybody starts to lose, if anyone loses individually, we're going to bail him out. We're not going to let his individual loss affect the mission. Okay. So the idea of a game of honor. So death games are all around us, right? We're still, even when you have a group of brothers that you can play a game of life with, that you can train with, that you're not worried are going to stab you in the back, you're probably still collectively playing a game where you're wagering life, liberty, or livelihood, right? But when you can play that death game as a team, it is an incredible boost to like your daily experience, the how you live your life, knowing, hey, the people that are in my circle, that are in my corner, that are right next to me all the time, those people are not going to betray me. Okay. We play the game together. Now, this requires some things. It requires a peer group. And now, the peer group is not an egalitarian group. There's going to be ranks. That's one of the purposes of Game of Life, is to virtuously determine what is the hierarchy in this little group. But you need economic actors. You probably need larger structures than a small nuclear family, and certainly not like a double income, no kids. Those sorts of people, if you get in a room with a bunch of people that have no generational motivation, it's very difficult for them to play virtuous games with you. Okay. Now, again, whatever group, whatever team, your tribe, your house, your company, your crew, between households, you're probably still playing a death game. You're probably still playing a game where if you lose sufficiently, then you can lose your life, your liberty, or your ability to provide for your family. But as humans, if we have a tribe and I've got 5, 10, 20, 50 guys around me, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. When I lose that, or when I'm part of a game, one of the real pinches of modernity is when we try to pretend that there's no consequences, that there is no death game. And what that means is that everyone around us is playing politics. We're just playing it in a very passive aggressive way, but it still signals to the back of your brain, to that tribal sense, that feudal instinct, hey, the people around you, they're not part of your tribe. You're alone. And that is a very psychologically unstable place to be. People don't like it. They don't enjoy it. So, and kind of to conclude this point, I'll read you a poem. This is from the founding of Switzerland. Um, the host of the nobles was solid, their order both thick and wide. This frustrated the pious host. One Winkelried said, if you will aliment, protect and provide, my pious wife and children, I will do a daring deed. True and dear Confederates, I shall lose my life doing it. Their battle order is locked tight. We may not breach it, but I will make a breach. For this may you aliment my family forever. Saying thus, he quickly grasped an armful of pikes. On his own, he created a passage and his life took an end. He had the courage of a lion. His brave and manly death was a benefit for the four forest cantons. And thus they soon began to break up the battle order of the nobles. With hewing and with thrusting, may God keep his soul. Had he not done this deed, it would have cost the Confederates many a brave man. And that phrase, if you will aliment, if you will protect, the aliment is the word from which we get alimony, right? To provide for women and children in the style to which they are accustomed, right? And the idea here is if I do something that's of great risk, and maybe it even kills me, but you will protect my wife, protect my children, raise them up so that they know who I am and honor me, right? I mean, that's in the wake of the Charlie Kirk thing, one of the just the things that just sent chills down my blood were people would say things like, well, I hope that something happens to Erica Kirk so that her children can be taken away and placed in foster care and learn to know that their father was a bad person, basically. They would usually say it in a much more profane manner. But that's the ultimate death, right? That's the ultimate death. And our enemies want that fate for us. Whereas, if Charlie Kirk, if his son is able to be raised knowing his name, knowing he was a man of honor, knowing that he left a mighty inheritance for his family, yeah, he fell, but he didn't lose, right? He didn't lose. And we can give that to our friends and to our brothers, right? We can make this is a battlefield covenant, if you will, and this is the quintessential idea of a game of honor, right? Where we appreciate that we are playing the death game, but we're not going to betray one another. We're going to take care of one another. Okay. So I know that was my habit, my custom is to open it up for questions. So I think what I'll do is anybody that was on the Great Houses call where we talked about games of honor, games of life, if you want to make a comment, and then I'll move on. Any comments on that?
I have a comment.
Yeah, yeah.
When we first read this, um, I something snapped into place for me. I spent basically my daughter's 11, so basically the last decade in a spiral of hypochondria and terror of death. And it's very clear, like it would get worse when we had another kid. It very clearly, though not explicitly, not something that I was conscious of, um, in the front of my mind, but it was this idea of if I die, my kids will be absolutely alone, and they will be just in the radiation of the culture, and what could I possibly do to, and I had life insurance, but like money was not the issue. Um, and I don't know how common that is. I think it's fairly common. Tucker Carlson talked about it. He said, "Yeah, when I was 35, I was horrified of death." Um, and yeah, this idea that I don't know that the Swiss had the same problems of like what culture will my children be raised in? Maybe they did,
They
but
did. They did. So yeah, they did.
yeah. So I mean, but knowing that there were people at your side and at your back who would pick up those duties in a way that you would feel good about. Um, Hugely important. I mean, it certainly would have changed the whole psychological valence of my 20s and early 30s.
This is how we get people to sacrifice, right? This is how we get people to sacrifice. But everyone says, well, where are the right-wing soldiers, right? Where we have all, you have the Tranissaries, as Oren calls it, which is just a great phrase. So we should repeat it as often as possible. The left has their Tranissaries, right? They're shock troops. What do we have? And what I've always said is what we have is young men if we will offer them the covenant that is all the battlefield covenant that's always been offered. If we will offer them, to this we pledge our fortunes, our mutual honor, right? The ending of the Declaration of Independence. That's why the Declaration of Independence ends with that oath, because you have to make this. You have to make this. Okay. Otherwise, things don't happen. Our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'll keep going. The another idea that was just hugely important had a bunch of kind of feedback saying this is one of the ideas that I had to hit tonight is the idea that there are actually three roles of patronage. The patronage is so we tend to think of patronage as there's the patron and then there's the client, and so there's this strict up-down hierarchical structure. There's the guy that's higher and the guy that's lower. And when you study patronage systems, most successful patronage systems are all about a third position called a mediator. Okay. And the mediator is the person who is bringing the higher and lower person together, who is helping bridge the gap. Because there's a cultural gap between somebody who has enough power and money to make a difference and somebody who, does not have those things, right? They need a third person to step in and build relationship. And this person, in some ways is like a mini patron to the client and a mini client to the big patron. The flow of favors is still working here, but he has bridged that gap. And one of the things we talked about in the Great Houses call that we went through this on, and I encourage you all to go and listen to it. It's in the playlist. On the Great Houses call, there's the pinned comment is a YouTube playlist, and it's all in here. Is the recognition that in many ways the government has kind of usurped that third position, that mediator position, and we need to restore that structurally and learn how to do this skill of mediating and bringing together, the tech bros who have all the money and the farmers who have no money, right? If we can get good at doing that, the world is our oyster, right? If we can get good at mediating between, people that the financiers, the factory workers, the tech bros, and the farmers, and there's a number of other examples that just kind of this is how our society lays itself out. That it's the breakdown in that mediating role and the assumption that the government is just going to play that role in a neutral and fair fashion that is breaking our culture right now. Okay. So now again, we talked about patronage and mediation, I think, for like two episodes, and both of those episodes went long. So there's 4 hours of content. So anybody on the call who was on those episodes who has a thought that they wanted to chime in with on what you got out of the patronage discussion, especially there's a book called Honor, Patronage, Kinship, and Purity by David De Silva, which if you're interested in studying these things, I highly commend to all of you. It's a wonderful. So there's a lot of books on the early church that are there's famous book called The Patient Ferment of the Early Church, and it's very left coded. It's very female coded. There's a lot of true things in it, a lot of worthwhile things to learn about how the early church worked, but it's giving you an incomplete picture. And Honor, Patronage, Kinship, and Purity lays out these patronage structures in a book that we all understand, that we all can relate to, and connects it to the actual Roman culture that these events were taking place in, and I think it gives a incredible insight. So, anybody want to make a comment about the patronage discussion?
I would
I'll
just
jump in
add
here. Go ahead.
that lists in rhetoric. If you start a speech, you go one, two, three. So your first item is your most important. Though sometimes you will see, have a flourish. Your third item will be your most important. And then when you end a speech, it's 3, 2, 1. So when the founding fathers ended with our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor, they're placing that as, that's called an inclusion. They're placing that as the number one item. Honor is the non-tangible good that is exchanged between patron and client, that there is reciprocity. The scales are balanced. They may have received some lands and even the ability to get revenues from those lands. How do you make a recompense? How do you balance the scale so you don't have a chip on your shoulder because I owe this guy? Well, I have returned to him honor.
Right. Well, one of the things that's so important, it's I think necessary for us to study patronage because our minds are infected by our transactional culture, right? If the problem, we have a couple of problems. One is that we're infected by egalitarianism, and the second is that we're infected by transactionalism. And so unless we have paid back a person dollars and cents, right, then we feel like we owe them. And in a genuine patronage system, if you are behaving in an honorable fashion towards your patronage, then you are more than meeting the interest payments. You are actually in good standing. If you have the right, if you say, hey, I'm loyal to this person. They bailed me out. I will show up and defend them in their hour of need. I'm their guy, right? And I believe in them, and I want to make sure that their purpose and their larger plan, is maintained. That's enough. That you don't owe them in the sense of, well, you're a bad person for not paying back a loan. You are in good standing with them and with God, and God smiles on you, right? And that there has to be a way for people of lower role, lower socioeconomic status to return and remain in good relationship with people that have much, much more power and money than they do. And this is the way you do it, right? And now you're going to need a mediator to tell you what the rules are and what fort to use and when to dress up and all of those things. But this is not a transactional relationship, and that's a beautiful and freeing thing. Given that humans do have different capacities, there's going to be some people that just earn 100,000 times more money than you do in your entire life. Go ahead, DB.
And when you listen to the lengthier episodes, I typically will chime in with examples illustrating some of the points Gregory makes from either the Old or the New Testaments, but also from other ancient works. That this is a cultural region. It's not just one country; it's the whole Mediterranean basin. And then we just have less ancient works from other areas, but it's universal even in Northern Europe, all over the world. It's this universal thing. Just an example that came to mind. We have all sorts of laws about this stuff now, but oh gosh, I'm blanking on the Roman orator Cicero. Cicero was not of noble blood. His family was poor, and he was this guy of just breathtaking talent. And he becomes a senator, but he has no money. So the great houses, they loaned him money with the understanding that he didn't really need to pay them back. They would just forgive this and then occasionally loan him more. They're really just supporting the senatorial level because he's clearly made of senatorial stuff. Right. And then he goes on to be basically temporary dictator in the Catalan crisis. He saves the republic from a violent attempt to overthrow it. So they give him the title of, Pater Patres, the first father of the fatherland. And, so many nobles forgive the debts that he had to them because their support. Eventually he gets invited to join the triumvirate. Some bad things that we don't need to talk about how it ends for Cicero. But it's just this example of that nobody thought that they owned Cicero. It was, he's supporting us, we're supporting him. He's like clearly the guy that should be first consul, right? He's the equivalent of the president, but he's just not on our level financially. So we're going to boost him, and he's going to move the senatorial class forward. And there's lots of examples of this in history. And that was not a bribe. That was not buying him. They didn't own him. That was them being magnanimous with him.
And he was magnanimous in return, right? And that equal exchange of I'm giving you something for which you're grateful, and I'm receiving something for which I'm grateful, and we're there's a whole bunch of, like, one of the cool things about this is when you study this patronage concept, the whole of the ancient Western culture, biblical and non-biblical, opens itself up to you. This was such a core idea in every text you've ever read and thought, huh, that's some weird behavior. I don't get that. Right? 9 times out of 10, patronage, these linked ideas of patronage are right at the center of what is driving these people. And it's just awesome.
The distinction that's critical here, I think, is between owning and belonging,
Right.
because yeah, nobody owned each other, but they did belong to each other. They did owe duties of loyalty to each other. And the way that what I was going to say earlier, the way that the state has successfully interposed itself as the mediator in all these relationships has been by framing patron and client relationships as inherently resentful and oppressive and contemptuous. That
Patronizing, inherently patronizing.
patronizing, right? And that's funny to think that like that word has become like a slur to patronize.
That is not an
Um,
accident. If we had time, that's not an accident.
right, right. And I'll you can shut me up. I'm going to comment because back and forth makes for good radio. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think it's important. This is a good point. This is a good point. So I'm just going to touch briefly on the five pillars of culture. Um, the point of this is, for thousands and thousands of years, the last three pieces, and again, I did just 2 episodes. It's like 4 hours solid of content on basically this slide over the past couple weeks. So if you want to, if you're this is if what I'm saying is interesting to you, please go review those episodes. The rituals, the merch, the festivals, those were the expensive parts of culture for thousands of years. That was the thing that was the capital intensive part. The covenants and honor piece, that could all be done between individuals of good character, right? And specific over the last 100 years, and specifically over the last 10 years, starting in 2014, with what the improvements in bandwidth that drove the podcast revolution, right? Video podcasting and Joe Rogan and all of that, right? That was driven by technological changes and how easy it was to make video podcasts and broadcast them. All of these they go through a Gutenberg revolution. So they go from somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 times cheaper than they were before. Okay. 25 years ago, it would cost you, 20, $30 million to spin up a new TV channel in those, in those days dollars. Right now, if you had $100,000 grant, you could easily spin up 3 podcasts, and then assuming that there was enough interest and people were paying attention to them, right? They could then be self-funded. Okay, $100,000 is probably wildly more money than you would actually need to get quality people to start podcasts. But that's an incredible opportunity for us to establish our own status games, to establish our own cultures, to establish something that creates the same level of cultural goods for our local, or our internet community, but our small scale community, our human scaled community, as ABC, CBS, NBC did for America in the 1980s, let's call it, right? Like there's an incredible opportunity right now. And the hard parts, the expensive parts, are wildly cheaper than they've been, since the fall of the Roman Empire, basically. What we've got to figure out is, how do we do covenants? How do we do honor? And that really is just kind of a spiritual journey, a thing that we need to think about, and we can think about it, right? And we need to think about this because I'll make one final comment on status, and then I want to jump into the 4 pillars of household. We pay penalties, status penalties, for doing right wing things, right? And we're not all the same on the call, right? Some people have different viewpoints on different things, but I guarantee you, if you're here, if you're listening to the sound of my voice, at some point there will be a right wing or a Christian or a biblical thing, conservative thing that you want to do that makes perfect sense and is very virtuous. And you know, if I do this thing, I'm going to pay a status penalty. My wife and my children are going to pay a status penalty. People that are associated with me are going to pay a status penalty in the eyes of the, kind of the overculture, right? The leftist global culture, right? And what the conservative instinct is to try to solve that problem with money, with paying people more money to kind of buy back their status. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that is a doomed effort. And what you need to do is invest actually less money. Like you can invest less money in creating cultural institutions, status granting institutions, right? Then you would need to even, I mean, probably two or three families, the level of money you would need to add to their world to make up for the status penalty. You could just spin up a whole world of content, producing entities that create cultural goods that those people could then join into. And if they join into that culture, then they're joining into the status game that that culture represents. And then we don't care if the left penalizes us, right? Then they don't have the capacity to ostracize us, right? And the the story that I told that I want to tell over and over again is basically the story of the police families in Fort Worth, right? So Fort Worth traditionally had a very high level of policing in the mid 2000s, and then kind of moving into the 20 teens, they noticed that they were getting the quality of their policing was dropping dramatically. And what they figured out was happening was these cops, and then especially their wives, were paying a status penalty for being the wives of cops. And that broke their marriages down. It put them under financial pressure. And then cops that are doing a high stress job under financial pressure, you get bad policing, right? And that goes a variety of different ways, right? But regardless of which particular flaw those men embrace, you get a lot of bad policing. And what a number of churches, and it was like four churches in Fort Worth has thousands of churches, I think. So lots of churches. But four churches basically stepped in and they committed to have the women of their church go and love on the cops' wives, and there was a dramatic turnaround. Because and one of the things that just struck me was one of the cops' wives said it allowed me to realize that this pressure that I was feeling was from outside of me. It wasn't my husband, and it wasn't the people of our community. It was something, she didn't have the words for this, right? But it was sort of the gay race communism of the global order, right? And being able to experience love and connection and status affirmation from people in her culture, in her community, was an incredible boon to this woman and to others like her. And then the quality of the policing went back up, right? Which is what Fort Worth was concerned about, right? But this is you could not have just gotten that effect by paying the cops more, even if they had the money, which they didn't, right? But four churches volunteering time, basically going over with gift baskets and saying nice things, materially improved the policing outcomes in one of America's major cities. This is a powerful, and that was before all of these innovations in cultural technology that we've had, in the past 10, 15 years. All right. So there's enormous opportunities. Hopefully this is a message of hope. Okay. Anybody that was on the last couple Great Houses calls, or if anybody's got to make a comment before on these points before we move into the final point of the night, the floor is yours.
Hey, Greg. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in front of somebody.
Yeah, go ahead, Chip.
Basically, I really like that story, and I'm trying to synthesize some ideas as to, everybody knows I'm one of the older members of the group, and what I've been seeing is that people my age and older are basically been shoveled to the side, and I'm trying to think about practical ways, because on the one hand, these people have the wealth. They do. Overall, I mean, not to the extent of like Bill Gates or anything like that, but they've got the wealth, but they don't have anything of a network. I mean, no network at all. They go home and watch Gunsmoke. So I'm kind of curious to how to synthesize that, if there's any ideas.
I mean, I think that there's a gentleman named Tim Yarbrough that has very effectively taken over his corner of Alabama. I think his son is now one of the state reps. And one of the first things that he does when he does his version of community organizing is he goes and he gets a bunch of the teens and 20 somethings and they figure out where all the older shut-ins are and they go and serve them, right? And they love those people back into their churches, and then the older people start to tithe and the churches have money and then the kids can get helped, but he doesn't tell the kids that's what's going to happen. He's done this like a dozen times now, but he just says no, we just need to go serve those people. So it's the stuff that DB is talking about on the civil engagement stuff. That's how you do it, right? That's how you do it. You go and serve them and let them know, hey, we love you, you're valued, and good things, amazingly good things can happen. Now you have to have the group that goes out and serves, and then you have to have a respectable bucket to kind of catch people like a church, and presumably a evangelical kind of mainstream church, not probably a church that most of the people on the call would be very attracted to go to. Okay, but you got to have something that can catch them. But yeah, you have an activator, and then you have a catching institution, and then it's amazing what can happen. So yeah, his name is Tim Yarbrough. I know him, Andy knows him, and if you're interested, I'm sure he'd be delighted to speak to you. And he's in your age range. So go ahead, Nick Little. You had a comment.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I love the comment that you just made. That's really excited to hear. I mean, about how to activate, older people, get them involved, hear their stories. Their stories are amazing if you listen to old people. So that was not my comment. The comment that I was gonna make about the status thing was kind of simply that there is a status penalty. And one of the things that I've noticed is my wife and I, we came from like the, secular world. And my wife is somebody who sort of felt the pressure. She started joining Bible studies and getting exposed to other women who were Christians. And like the positive affirmation that came from that was like a full 180 in terms of her own sort of mental well-being and mental support, and like, hey, it's okay to do this. And so I would, and again, no amount of money could have purchased that, right? It took everything from these other women sort of reaffirming her decision to walk this way. So creating that community where people come in and they feel that, especially for like the wives, I mean, it's um, uh, very, very, very important. So
Yeah.
amen.
Well, and one of the things I think that we see is when I think we have to recognize when we're doing a status thing and when we're doing an actual money ROI thing, right? If you have a functional need with a functional ROI, we can get you money for that. If you're asking for money to try to meet status needs within your family or within your community, you're trying to buy off, why do I need to pay this guy so much? Well, because he's got an expensive high maintenance wife. High maintenance is code for she is displeased with the status which she is currently occupying, right? And the I don't have time to walk this through in the way that I do in the episodes, but I really think in a lot of ways this status game stuff is that ancient spirit called vanity. And if you ask virtuous people for money so that you can go then make a sacrifice to vanity, they're not going to give it to you. Certainly not more than once. All right. So go ahead, Kevin.
One of the earliest uh red pills on all of this as a young husband and father was witnessing my wife's uh emotional affect and feelings when she was doing laundry or the dishes in our home by ourselves versus when she was doing dishes and laundry at a rich friend's house with their daughters, with their daughters-in-law. Um, we were in a beautiful home with people who she admired and respected, and they were doing the task together, and she was in heaven. And the nature of the task had not changed at all. It was entirely about the who was doing it with her, who was who was in the same role that she was in.
And that
Kevin
is
makes
probably the female version of that, the games of life that we were talking about earlier. Go ahead, Dean.
Kevin makes a great point there, and I know you want to move on to the next part, which is very important. That these are some of the deeper issues we get into on the calls. So encourage you guys to both check out the recordings and visit the call. But I would observe there that that's where you see a dynamic sometimes play out. I mean, where people, and I'm not speaking specifically to Kevin's wife on this, where people view their own family as low rank and undesirable or high status versus their own family as high rank, desirable, and high status when they're doing, especially the women, doing the things with kin. Where like if your sisters are great people and you live around your sisters, most people don't even live near their families anymore, and you're like doing the cooking for the family Thanksgiving dinner. A lot of families, sisters will do that together. If they're great people in high rank and admirable and good, this is all a subjective judgment. Well, now this is an effortless task and we love working together. But if they're low rank and despicable people and not really who you want to be, right now this is a very fraught cooperative thing. And the undergirding thing there is the perception of the status.
Yeah. I mean, and one of the interesting, someone in the chat was mentioned, Kevin was mentioned in the chat, getting a housekeeper. One of the things to remember is all of the bad stories you hear about people getting housekeepers are when the housekeeper made the wife feel like the housekeeper was above her in status. But you can fix that with money. That is where money and your authority as a man can be applied, friends. And not that much money either. You just got to make sure that your wife understands. And some women will actually resist this. They'll want to serve another woman who's in their home. You just got to help them appreciate, hey, no, you're the wife. She's the help, and she is there to help you, and you need to be in charge of her. That's how this has got to work. And it's a very, very if you can get it working properly, it can be an incredible boost to what you're doing. So here is the one of the things that I really wanted to talk about tonight, because this will lead me to the action items that I want to give to you that I think anyone can do on this path. So these are the 4 pillars of a household, right? Or of a great house. This is what you need to have all of these in some degree to be able to keep people around and to be able to keep property, and then ultimately to attain to the level of a great house. So the first one is wealth creation. You got to have a way of making money in the world. Okay, you got to have some method of accumulating wealth. It's got to be something that you know how to do, that you can teach to other people, that it can't just be probably low skilled labor. That doesn't work. You have to carve out for yourself a way of making money. Then I'll skip to kind of the third one here. You need the productive property. You need what Marx called the means of production, preferably the means of production that are paired and work well with your creation of wealth method, right? That's why they're a variant of the same color, okay? But they are distinct, right? In the same way that the example I give to people when I'm helping them think about this is, there's a difference between driving the car, which is the money of driving a truck and hauling stuff around, which is how you generate money, and being a mechanic and keeping the engine running well. Those are actually different skills, right? So you can be really good at driving the car and taking in money and be a terrible mechanic, or you can be a terrible, driver and be a good mechanic, or you could be both, but they're different skills, okay? Then the other 2 pillars are evangelism or recruitment, or convincing romance, convincing people to leave their current situation and join your household. And this is an important skill, but all of you that are married, have attained to the first level. You have accomplished the first thing, which is you convinced a woman to wed her life to yours and follow you around in what you're doing. Okay, and that's a good thing. And then the last piece is the last pillar is discipleship and training. This idea of how do we raise once people have come into our world, whether they're born in or they've joined through evangelism or recruitment, how do we upskill them, make them more productive, more qualified, more excellent, so that they can be of a greater service to the house, right? And when we're talking about a great house, there's multiple levels to this, right? So a great house traditionally is a house that's politically relevant within its domain. Okay, so that means that, and you run into this depending on kind of the scale. When you get to the point where your household or your company has a measurable portion of the GDP of an area, political things related to that area, the politicians will come to you and say, "What do you want?" There's a guy up in New England that has Curios Wealth Management, Curios Property. They're kind of Christian nationalists and good boys, good guys, kind of in the same vein as we are, and kind of more on the like the new founding types. And the founder of Curios tells this story of he bought like 3 or 4 apartment buildings in some town in New Hampshire, and the mayor called him to say, well, "Hey, what do you want?" And he's like, "Well, what do you mean? What do I?" No, you own 15% of the rental units in my town. So I want to know what makes you happy. I want to know what's going to cause you to pay attention and not, rent these out to the wrong kinds of people. I want our town to flourish, and I need you to be happy for our town to flourish. And this was, as is often the case with evangelical Christians, just a shocking event to our friend who started Curios. It should not be a shocking event to any of us in Exit or anybody that certainly not anybody that attends the Great Houses Call regularly. This is the inevitable piece, right? But long before you're a great house, the first step is just to be a good house, right? How do you be a good house? And when we think about a good house, we think about something that is attractive to people, okay? And so what I'm going to tell you, the first thing that you can do is have a compelling vision. If you have a compelling vision, even if you don't have the fullness of what you want in terms of the creation of wealth, the ability to recruit, because that requires some level of property that you can put people in, and discipleship and training. Like, even if you don't have that, if you have a compelling vision for how you're going to get it, you can start to draw people to yourself, right? And the great example here is Kevin, right? Kevin did not wait until he had fundraised tens of millions of dollars and founded Exitville to start talking about what he was doing and attracting you to it, right? And you came because Kevin articulated a compelling vision, and we're going to get the rest of the piece. Okay, we're going to get the rest of the levels here. Okay, so you have a good house, you have a compelling vision that you can articulate, and the good news is, anybody who wants to do this, anybody who wants to set themselves on this path, there is enough resources in Exit to help you articulate a compelling vision in each one of these 4 areas. Okay. Then the next level is a household. Think of a household as a house that holds on to people, a house that holds on to property, a house that holds on to things, and that has the ability to pass things down. Right. When you have a good house, people are like, "Oh man, I want what you have. What you have is good. I want what you have to be passed down." The level of household is when, hey, we actually have systems and processes and things in place to pass down an inheritance that is growing, right? And that's really where the space where we need to be focused our ideas on is, how do we get to the point where we've got a good house, right? We've got something that people would want to join if we can figure out a useful place for them. And then by the end of our lives, get to the point where we've got a house that can hold on to something, right? Can hold on to your kids, can hold on to your employees, can hold on to your business and accomplish that generational succession. And then beyond that, the great house piece will take care of itself, right? In the fullness of time. And sometimes it's not that long, right? Because great houses can be quickly formed from the ruins of other things, right? But this is a framework that I wanted to put in front of you. So this is new. You all got this by showing up on this call. Thank you. DB spurred me on to make this diagram, which, as I always say, I'm not terribly aesthetically inclined. So I hope in the future to have better diagrams. But these are the four pillars of the house. These if you can do those four things, if you can create wealth, if you can recruit, if you can own the productive property, and if you can disciple and train up the people that you have in your system, then you can conquer the world. And in the fullness of time, you will become a great house. So there, go ahead, Kevin.
One of the puzzles, one of the like narrative puzzles of exit that I've struggled to articulate has been this whole thing got started with doxing. And it wasn't about doxing even then, but the phenomenon that we were at war with was the sense in which ordinary people with jobs and attachments and things to do and responsibilities were being shut out of the halls of power in preference for people who were unattached, morally unmoored, um, um, just sort of childless. Basically, people who were very small in comparison with the power flows around them that made the whole society unmoored in a similar way, that made all of humanity small relative to these forces and helpless. And so if you want to fix that, you need people who can accumulate power and wealth in a way that is not morally corrosive to themselves or their children, to accumulate wealth and power in a way that draws them together rather than flinging them apart. And basically, I mean, like it's all of this is about restoring human agency, human judgment to these faceless, bureaucratic market and managerial systems. And so that's the why. What does the how look like? Well, the how looks like dynastic families building this kind of wealth and power and influence and being loyal to one another in a human sense and hanging on to their own children in a human sense and forming bonds of fellowship and bonds of reciprocal care and loyalty that transcend individual relationships, families connecting with families. My church has a document, the Family Proclamation, that says the family is the fundamental unit of society, which does not mean the family's super duper good or the family's super duper important. It means that the family, as opposed to the individual or the state or the, municipality or whatever, is the fundamental organizing unit of the society. That's the dimension of analysis to look at. And so I see this Great Houses call, this Great Houses project, as the operationalizing of that spiritual mission. This is our best stab, and I think it's a good stab at what that actually looks like in practice. And that's what's behind the investment syndicate. That's what's behind the entrepreneurship calls. That's what's behind the fitness call. Because you have to be able to regulate in your house and you have to be appealing to your wife and you need to be in shape. And that's what's behind the content creation call because we have to be messengers for these things. We have to be able to articulate the beauty that we see so that we can be attractive. This is a fundamentally uh, attractive Dionysian task. We've talked about that on another call. So much of this is about building something aspirational that other people want to be a part of so that you can pull them out of the current of atomization and managerialism that we find ourselves in. And partly that's because these things are sort of destructive and evil and inhuman uh, of themselves, but also because they're breaking down and something's going to replace them. And the thing that could replace all these systems could be something really bad. And in a lot of places, lots of things are going to replace these things. So, like in some places, the thing that replaces these systems will be really bad. Um, but you can make it so that in your family, your community, uh, you're a place of safety. You're a restorer of paths to dwell in. That's why Isaiah 58 is I think my favorite scripture. That's what Nico gave me the print for. I'm sorry, I don't mean to monologue, but I wanted to kind of bring all these things together to like, what are we doing here? How do all these pieces snap into this one mission? That's kind of why I wanted Greg to present on this. Um, yeah, I yield my time.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. No, I mean, basically, when I was talking to DB about okay, what am I going to say, I mean, basically, the purpose of this was to provide a vector for you to monologue on. But in conclusion, three things to do, four if you're bold. Okay. So the first three things on this list, I think basically any of us can do. We just need to start doing it. And the fourth thing is a little bit of a stretch for where we are, but I want it on the list so we can think about it, right? So the first one is the investment syndicate kind of preferred shares model linked with business mentorship. And for all of the folks, that's how you get productive property. So money is not productive property unless you like control a stock market. Okay. Um, and as we're finding out more and more, money is not really a piece. It's not true productive property. It's a share in a marketplace, and the people that actually do own that marketplace seem to manage to be able to make the most money, and you make less and less as we go forward. So take your money, take your bonds, take your stocks, help guys that have demonstrated some level of ability to create wealth own productive property. That gets them productive property and it gets you productive property because now you own a piece of a business that there is actual humans contributing to, right? That they're actually linked in the tangible real economy. Okay. Then the second thing that we can, and there's just so much more we could say about that, but that's what the investment syndicate is for. That's what the future business incubator type things that we're going to be doing and talking about are for. I just kind of mentioned it. That's how generally what you're doing there is ideally getting productive property for somebody with a skill and somebody with money because a skill by itself and money by itself are actually not very good productive properties. Money can be a productive property with a bunch of codicils and conditions, some of which are being violated quite shamelessly. Okay. So number two, housing for young people. Okay. We have a bunch of folks that could be sorted. So young ladies, late teens, young ladies that we're trying to hopefully get married off, or late 20s young ladies that have gone to college and we still are trying to get them married off, can come on as household assistants. This works much better if they move across the country. Okay. I don't know why. It just does. If you stay within your family, if you stay within your community, if you move to a new city and you work as a household manager or a household assistant in an affiliated family, right? But you're far away and you're able to bond to that new family that you're a part of because they're your connection point in the community. It's a good thing. The other thing is young men. I think we should really be swapping, if we've got young men in our lives, somebody needs to hire them, somebody needs to house them, and we can and again, moving people, sorting people is a really effective way of creating value, and it's a good thing for the group. Okay. And you want to mentor these people, right? Obviously, all the way through. You want the young ladies to be mentored in what it means to be a good wife and mother, and an actual conservative woman, which is pretty much got to happen in a home, friends. And you want the young men to be mentored in how to be jacked and how to work hard and how to have both money-making skills and practical skills that aren't dependent upon these hyper complex, hyper large systems. Okay. Then one of the great things that I think Exit should always be doing is looking for, if we've got some unattached young men, tech bros that are kind of milling around, hey, there's no reason why you guys shouldn't form a clique, form a cohort, and pick a city, and 4 or 5 guys move to that city and start a business together as a cohort. That's a great thing to do. Okay. And well within our capacity. So those 3 things we should just be doing. We should always be looking for opportunities. Those are low-hanging fruit. The fourth thing is showing hospitality, figuring out ways to bring families, right? Husband, wife, children, and introduce them to the new places. First, it starts with family, and then you move to fully relocating, families, especially relocating families from blue or purple areas to red or as Kevin calls it, MAGA red places, because the amount of impact that you can have in a MAGA red town with 3 or 4 families that are aligned is huge, absolutely massive. Okay, so I think this is the thing that those are things that those first 3 things, I think those are the action items. You can do those things. And if we just start doing those types of actions, sorting people, starting businesses, investing in getting productive property, uh, you know, between members of the group, then we will find ourselves on the path to household and then ultimately to great houses. And we'll know we're succeeding. We'll know we're getting there when we can start to actually relocate, show hospitality, and relocate entire families. Once you get to the point where you can relocate families, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. So, all right, that's my prepared remarks for this evening. So, yeah, Chip, I'm happy to post slides to Rocket Chat. Can do for sure.
Any other questions for the recording, fellas? Very good. I will go ahead and stop it. Greg, thank you
Hold
so
on.
much for putting this together.
One
Very, very
one
well done.
question.
Oh, Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, Gregory, I already know the answer to this one, but I think everybody else needs to as well. Where can we watch or listen to the recordings from all of your previous presentations?
So you go to the Great Houses channel, which is linked a bunch of times in the announcements. Then there's a pinned message at the top that has a private YouTube playlist, and you go there, and pretty much all the calls are listed there at this moment. So yeah, and hopefully I'll be able to get the recording from this one for this one from Kevin, and we'll put it up there post haste. So unless of course JCV in his editorial discretion decides this should not be posted.
No, it's tremendous. Really good stuff. Um, yes, very good. I'll talk a little bit about um some other strategic questions, but I'll go ahead and stop the recording here. Thanks, everybody.